Leo, how about we play a game? Leo looked at me with curiosity. A game? I smiled. Yes, but this won't be like any game you've ever played. He frowned. What kind of game? I reached into my pocket, pulled out a $10 bill, and placed it in his hand. Then I looked him straight in the eyes. This game has only one rule. No. The door slammed shut right in Leo's face. He took a deep breath, tightened his grip on the glass pitcher, and walked toward the next house. Hi, would you like to buy some fresh homemade lemonade? No, thank you. Another door closed. Tom watched him quietly. Is he really going to do this all by himself? John shook his head. I think the real problem is that he only has 1 week. Leo looked down at the glass pitcher in his hand, then at the paper cups. The excitement on his face slowly faded into worry. Warren looked at him. You're focusing on the wrong thing. Leo looked up. What do you mean? People don't buy lemonade. They buy a reason. Fresh lemons being sliced, doors closing one after another, the scorching summer sun, sweat running down Leo's face, empty cups, heavy footsteps. A few minutes later, Leo slowly sat down on a bench by the side of the road. He placed the glass pitcher beside him, then the paper cups. He lowered his head. His eyes stayed fixed on the ground. For a long moment he didn't move. Then he heard a voice. Hey, kid. Leo slowly lifted his eyes. A pair of worn sneakers stood right in front of him. He hesitated. Let me tell you a story. It all started during the first days of summer vacation. Life was pretty simple for Leo. There was no school, no homework. He didn't have to wake up early in the morning. He spent his days riding his bike, playing baseball with his friends, or practicing guitar in his room. As for me, lately I'd been spending most of my free time reading, but this time I wasn't researching stocks, or real estate, or financial freedom. This time, a completely different question had been on my mind. How do wealthy families teach their children about money? The more I read, the more I noticed something interesting. Most successful families didn't give their children ready-made answers. Instead, they gave them small problems to solve. Because in real life, people don't make money by memorizing the right answers. They make money by learning how to solve problems. That idea stayed with me for days. Then, one morning I looked over at Leo as he quietly ate breakfast in the kitchen, and I smiled to myself. Maybe it was finally time for Leo to become part of the game. The next morning, Leo was sitting across from me at the breakfast table just like he always did. Leo, how would you like to take on a little challenge? He looked at me curiously. A challenge? What kind of challenge? I reached into my pocket, pulled out a $10 bill, and quietly placed it on the table. Leo looked at the money, then back at me. This $10 is yours. A small smile appeared on his face. Really? Not yet, he frowned. What do you mean, not yet? I picked up the bill and handed it to him. This challenge has only one rule. Leo leaned forward, listening carefully. You have exactly 1 week, and I want you to turn these $10 into 20, all by yourself. Leo stayed silent for a few seconds. He looked down at the bill in his hand, then back at me. What happens if I succeed? I smiled. If you can do it within 1 week, I'll give you another $20 as a reward. Leo's eyes widened. You mean I'll have $40? That's right. But if you don't succeed, you won't earn anything extra. Leo thought about it for another few seconds. Then a faint smile appeared on his face. Okay. Deal. He slipped the bill into his pocket. Just as he was about to stand up, he suddenly stopped. He turned back toward me. The excitement on his face had now turned into curiosity. But how am I supposed to do that? I smiled. That's the best part of this challenge. I'm not going to tell you. You'll figure it out. Leo walked upstairs to his room. He quietly closed the door behind him. He sat down at his desk. He pulled the $10 bill out of his pocket and placed it in front of him. For several minutes, he simply stared at it. Then he opened his desk drawer, took out a pen and a blank notebook. At the top of the page, he wrote one question in large letters. How can I turn $10 into 20? He sat there thinking for a while. Then he wrote down his first idea. A few seconds later, he crossed it out. He wrote down a second idea. Crossed that one out too. A third. A fourth, a fifth. None of them seemed to make any sense. About an hour later, the page was filled with crossed-out ideas. Leo leaned back in his chair and let out a deep sigh. Then his eyes drifted toward a shelf in his room. There, he noticed the little model car Uncle Tom had given him for his birthday last year. A small smile appeared on his face. Maybe Uncle Tom has an idea. About an hour later, Leo came downstairs. The $10 bill was still in his pocket. He grabbed his keys. Just as he was about to open the front door, Olivia called out from the living room, "Leo, where are you going?" As he put on his shoes, he answered to Uncle Tom's, "I'm kind of in a hurry. I'll explain when I get back." The door closed behind him. Olivia looked at me with a puzzled expression. "Why is he going to Tom's?" I smiled. "I think I know." She walked over, curious. "What's going on?" I told her about the challenge I had given Leo over breakfast. When I finished, she remained silent for a few seconds. Then a warm smile spread across her face. "I love it. I wish someone had given me a challenge like that when I was a kid." She gently placed her hand on my shoulder. "You came up with a really good idea," I smiled back. "I'm just as curious as Leo to see how this turns out." Leo got on his bike. Uncle Tom's house was only a few blocks away. A few minutes later, he pulled up in front of the house and rang the doorbell. Tom opened the door with a big smile. "Hey, buddy." "What a surprise." "Come on in." Leo told him everything that had happened that morning, the $10, the challenge, the 1-week deadline, and his mission to turn $10 into 20. Tom listened without interrupting. When Leo finished, he scratched his chin. That's interesting," he thought for a moment. "The first thing that comes to mind. Go buy a lottery ticket." Leo's eyes went wide. Tom stared at him for a second, then burst into laughter. No. Forget I said that. If your dad finds out I gave you that advice, he'll never let me back into your house." Leo laughed too. Tom leaned back in his chair. "Okay, maybe you could spend all the money on candy and sell it outside your school." He stopped, then slowly shook his head. "No. That's not a very good idea either." He let out a deep breath. "Leo, don't listen to me. I'm not exactly the creative type. I'm much better with interest rates, and with only 1 week. I don't think interest is going to help us much." He shrugged. "But I think you should talk to Uncle John. He's a lot more creative than I am. I'm sure he'll come up with something better." Leo stood up. "Thanks, Uncle Tom." Tom smiled. "Say hi to John for me. And if you actually figure out how to get rich, come back and tell me." Leo laughed. "Deal." He got back on his bike. This time, he headed toward Uncle John's house. About 20 minutes later, Leo finally arrived. Just as he was about to get off his bike, he spotted John sitting behind the wheel of his convertible. It looked like he was just about to leave. "Uncle John!" John hit the brakes. He smiled as he took off his sunglasses. "Hey, Leo. You got here just in time. I was about to head out." Leo leaned his bike against the fence. "Do you have a minute?" "Of course. What's up?" Leo told him everything that had happened that morning, the $10, the challenge, the 1-week deadline. Then he asked, "What do you think I should do?" John answered without hesitation. "Sales." Leo frowned. "Sell what?" John smiled. "Not what." "How?" Leo looked confused. John reached over, picked up an apple from the cup holder, and handed it to Leo. "Here." Leo looked down at the apple in his hand, then back at John. "Now. Sell it to me." Leo stood there for a few seconds. Then he shrugged. "But how?" John smiled. "That's exactly the point. Figure that out first." He started the engine. "I'd love to tell you more, but I have a client meeting in 10 minutes. Stop by again sometime. We'll talk about it properly." Then he pointed at the apple. "Oh, you can keep it." He smiled, pressed the gas pedal, and drove away. Leo stood there, watching him disappear down the street. He looked at the apple in his hand, then back at the empty road. "How?" he quietly murmured to himself. Just then, he thought of Uncle Warren. About 15 minutes later, Leo pulled up in front of Uncle Warren's house. There was no need to ring the doorbell. Warren was in the backyard watering the lawn. As soon as he spotted Leo, he turned off the hose. "Hey, Leo." What a surprise. "Come on back." A few minutes later, the three of them were sitting around the table in the backyard. Carol placed a glass of iced tea and a few cookies in front of Leo. "Enjoy." "Thank you, Aunt Carol," she smiled. "Now, tell us what's going on. You must have come here for a reason." Leo took a deep breath. Then he began telling them everything that had happened since breakfast. The $10, the challenge, the 1-week deadline, his visit to Uncle Tom, his visit to Uncle John, everything. Warren listened carefully without interrupting. When Leo finished, he smiled. "So, you went to Tom first?" "Yeah." "What did he say?" Leo laughed. "He told me to buy a lottery ticket." Warren and Carol burst into laughter. Leo couldn't help laughing too. Warren was still smiling. "That sounds exactly like Tom." A few moments later, the laughter faded. "So, what did John say?" Leo reached into his pocket, pulled out the apple, and placed it on the table. "Nothing. He just gave me this." Warren raised an eyebrow. "An apple?" "Yeah. And then he said, 'Sell it to me.'" Warren smiled softly. "I see." Leo looked at him in surprise. "What do you mean?" Warren picked up the apple, slowly turned it in his hand, then looked back at Leo. "John wasn't trying to teach you how to sell an apple. He was trying to teach you how selling really works." Leo still looked confused. Warren continued, "Listen, Leo. Being able to sell something has very little to do with what you have. It has everything to do with why someone else would want it." He gently placed the apple back on the table. "John didn't give you the answer because he wanted you to discover it yourself." There was a brief silence. Then Warren smiled. "You know, when I was your age, I used to sell lemonade during summer vacation." Leo's eyes lit up. "Really?" Warren nodded. "Yeah. My dad bought a few lemons and left the rest up to me." He smiled. "That was the first money I ever earned." Leo listened carefully. Then Carol joined the conversation. "Leo, would you like to stay for dinner? I can call your mom. I'll let her know you're having dinner with us so she won't worry." Leo glanced at his watch. He hesitated for a moment. A slightly embarrassed smile appeared on his face. "I'd really like to, but I think I should get going. It'll take me a while to ride home." Carol smiled with understanding. "Maybe next time." Leo stood up. "Thank you for the cookies. And thank you for the story, Uncle Warren." Warren smiled. "Maybe I'll tell you the rest of it someday." Leo smiled back. "Deal." He slipped the apple into his pocket, got back on his bike, and started riding home. That evening, Leo was quieter than usual at the dinner table. Every now and then, his mind drifted somewhere else. Then he'd look back down at his plate. It was obvious that something was on his mind, but he wasn't ready to share it with anyone yet. Olivia and I noticed. We exchanged a brief glance. Neither of us asked a single question, because sometimes an idea needs a little silence before it begins to grow. The next morning, Leo woke up before everyone else. He quietly got ready, slipped the $10 bill into his pocket, and left the house. About 30 minutes later, he came back from the neighborhood grocery store carrying 2 bags full of lemons. The moment he walked in, he headed straight for the kitchen. He set the bags down on the counter. Olivia looked at them in surprise. "What are those for?" Leo smiled excitedly. "I've made my decision. I'm going to sell lemonade around the neighborhood." I smiled too. "I think that's a great start." Leo didn't waste a second. He washed the lemons, cut them one by one, squeezed out the juice, added the sugar, stirred everything together, then carefully filled the glass pitcher. Olivia took a few steps closer. "Would you like a little help?" At that moment, she looked over at me. I gently shook my head. Olivia smiled. "You're right." Then she turned back to Leo. "Then I'll just taste it." Leo laughed and handed her a small cup. Olivia took a sip. "It's delicious." A big smile spread across Leo's face. He picked up the pitcher and the paper cups, took a deep breath, and walked out the door. He knocked on the first door. "Hello?" Would you like to buy some homemade fresh lemonade? No, thank you. The door closed. Second house? No. Third house? Maybe another time. Fourth house? No one answered. Fifth house? No, thanks. As the hours passed, the excitement on Leo's face slowly began to fade. The pitcher was still almost completely full. As the sun began to set, he slowly made his way back home. He quietly opened the front door and placed the pitcher on the kitchen counter. Olivia looked at him. How did it go? Leo shrugged. I didn't sell a single cup. A brief silence followed. I smiled. So? What are you going to do now? Leo answered without hesitation. I'm going to try again tomorrow. This time I'll head out earlier. He picked up the pitcher, opened the refrigerator, and carefully placed it inside. The next morning, this time, he was already awake before sunrise. He took the pitcher out of the refrigerator, packed the paper cups into his bag, and left the house. This time, instead of returning to the same streets, he headed toward the other side of the neighborhood. Maybe I'll have better luck today, he quietly whispered to himself. First door, no. Second door, no. Third door, no. An hour later, he still hadn't sold a single cup. He kept walking with tired steps. Eventually, he sat down on a bench by the side of the road. He placed the glass pitcher and the paper cups beside him. He lowered his head, lost in thought. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then he heard a voice. Hey, kid. Leo looked up. Standing in front of him was a boy about 16 years old. He was wearing a baseball uniform. Smiling, the boy pointed toward the field. Coach wants to see you. Leo looked around in surprise. Me? Yeah, you. Leo picked up the glass pitcher and followed him. Near the field, about 8 or 9 players were standing together. Practice had just ended. They were soaked in sweat, trying to catch their breath while drinking water. The coach smiled at Leo. Homemade lemonade? Leo nodded. Yes. The coach looked at the pitcher, then at his players, and turned back to Leo. How much for a cup? $2. The coach nodded. How many cups are in the pitcher? Leo thought for a moment. I think 8. The coach smiled. Perfect. Then he turned toward the team. All right, boys. Looks like we found today's drink. The players lined up with smiles on their faces. Leo began filling the cups one by one, the first, the second, the third, until finally the very last drop of lemonade was poured into the last cup. Leo looked down at the empty pitcher. He couldn't believe it. He had sold every single cup. The coach pulled out his wallet, took out a $20 bill, and handed it to Leo. Leo looked at the money, then back at the coach in surprise. But that's $4 too much. The coach placed the bill in Leo's hand. Keep the change. The ice-cold lemonade really hit the spot today, he smiled. A huge grin spread across Leo's face. Thank you. The coach gently patted him on the shoulder. Good job, kid. As the team walked back toward the field, Leo stood there for a few seconds without moving. He looked at the $20 bill in his hand, then at the empty glass pitcher. The exhaustion had disappeared from his face. He was surprised. He was happy. He still couldn't quite believe what had just happened. He took a deep breath and started walking home. He slowly opened the front door, then proudly raised the empty glass pitcher into the air. He looked like a young commander returning home after a great victory. The smile on his face was so contagious that Olivia and I looked at each other and couldn't help laughing. I smiled. I guess. Today went a little better. Leo quietly reached into his pocket, pulled out a $20 bill, and placed it on the table. Olivia looked at me in surprise. I picked up the bill, smiled. So, you did it. Leo nodded. Yeah. I sold every single cup. I took out my wallet, pulled out another $20 bill, and placed it in front of Leo. I gave you my word. This is your reward. Leo looked at the 2 $20 bills lying on the table, then back at me. The smile on his face grew even wider. A brief silence filled the room. Then I looked at him. So, what are you planning to do with those $20? Leo didn't hesitate. A confident smile appeared on his face. I have an idea.